So, welcome friends once again to the last module, week module of NPTEL MOOC course, which is titled Strategic Trade and Protectionism Theory and Empirics. And we are at the verge of completion, and where we supposed to understand the institutional role, the role of the topmost institution or the regulating body which is guiding the member countries not to have further rivalries, and the institution is responsible for minimizing the trade restrictions. So, therefore, in this regard, we are supposed to understand the topmost organization which has been built or which was built in 1995 is none other than World Trade Organization, WTO. So, to understand the strategic trade and protectionism, we have already discussed many theories, many empirics, and many nitty-gritties of world trade. But interestingly, who is guiding? How it is being guided? Unless we do not understand that functions, our module of strategic trade is not complete. So, therefore, we are here on week number 8, lecture number 38. To discuss about structure and functions of WTO. So, as the background to this discussion of WTO, we need to understand that this is the platform where the trade problems get sorted out, and WTO came into being after the Uruguay round, which was actually under discussions or negotiation from the period 1986 to 1994, and this is the Uruguay round which has given birth to the formation of WTO. And so, under the aegis of general agreement trade and tariffs and trade, so this was the last round of GATT to discuss on WTO and its outcomes. So, whereas WTO mainly dealt with trade in goods, and where the GATT mainly deals with trade in goods, WTO and its agreements actually cover services, most importantly services, trade related inventions, basically TRIPS related issues, trade related intellectual property rights, where the property rights, its creations, invention, designs, everything are covered under the WTO. So, WTO, as you know already, that it came into being on the very 1st January 1995, and then it took over from the GATT. We have all discussed it. The last round of GATT was of Uruguay round. It was of 8th round, popularly known as Uruguay. So, based on number of negotiations which has resulted WTO in place of GATT. Now, this is a forum where the countries discuss and resolve many world trade problems from time to time, and they enjoy legal status, privileges, immunities, and that the World Bank and IMF get. So, India is a founder member not just in GATT, but also in WTO. So, WTO is an international trade organization, as we already said, having set of rules and principles mutually designed and agreed upon, promoting international trade in general, reduction to tariff and removal of import restrictions in particular. And since we said WTO is a result of negotiations, especially Uruguay round negotiations, therefore, we are here to also discuss multilateral trading systems over last 70 years old discussions. And on the count, merchandise exports have actually grown on the average by 6% annually. Total exports in 2016 were 250 times than the level of 1948 when the GATT was formed. So, therefore, the role of WTO is much more important, and then the system was developed through a series of negotiations under different rounds. 86 to 94 Uruguay round we have already discussed. Now, what we wanted to say, over different periods from the formation of GATT in 1947 The first very round was held in Geneva. The main purpose of those rounds were also emphasized in this table. The purpose here is tariff on the very first round, then on the second and look at how many member countries are or how many countries are present. 23 countries are present in discussing the issues related to tariff. Then there are fifth round particularly discussed on the issues of tariffs, and the member countries are actually very less. From 1964 to 67 there are Geneva round and Kennedy round. There are 2 rounds. These rounds discuss tariff as well as anti-dumping measures. And from 73 to 79 round again in Geneva. The WTO headquarters is also in Geneva. So, there are 2 rounds again, Tokyo and Geneva. They discuss also tariff, non-tariff measures and framework agreements related to various other issues. From 86 to 94 the Uruguay round, as I said, Geneva as well as Uruguay round discuss so many aspects: tariff, non-tariff, rules, services, intellectual property, dispute settlement. This has given birth to the formation of WTO, and there are 123 member countries. Out of that, India was very much present. So, in 1997, so agreement was actually reached particularly on telecommunication services. With 69 governments agreeing to wide ranging liberalization measures that went beyond those agreed in the Uruguay round. So, it was on telecommunications, especially in 1997. Then in that same year 40 governments successfully concluded negotiations for tariff free trade in information technology products. So, IT related products, another 40 governments successfully negotiated. 70 members again concluded a financial services deal covering more than 95% related to banking, securities, insurance and financial information. So, in 2000 new talks started, especially on agriculture and service related issues. So, therefore, these were incorporated into a broader framework and placed in the Doha development round, famously known as DDA. So, DDA is one of the famous aspects among different negotiations of WTO. So, this was launched at the 4th WTO Ministerial Conference. We will discuss what is Ministerial Conference, held in Doha, Qatar. So, in November 2001. Now, I have listed all the details for your better preparation for understanding concept. Therefore, I did not make it too short. And so, the new framework actually talks about non-agriculture tariffs, trade, the environment, actually WTO or rules and regulation related to anti-dumping and subsidies. And facilitations on trade, especially transparency of government procurement procedures, intellectual property and the gamut of other issues pertaining to developing countries as they face time to time as per the WTO agreements. A revised government procurement agreement adopted at WTO's 8th ministerial conference in 2011. So, now we are discussing WTO's ministerial conference, not the GATT ministerial conferences. So, which has expanded the coverage of the original agreements by an estimated $100 US billion a year. So, now that was the figure taken from World Trade Organizations. At the 9th ministerial conference, which was held in Bali 2013, WTO members struck the agreement on trade facilitation, which aims to reduce border delays by slashing red tapeism. Red taps are massively identified by different member countries, and therefore, this was also discussed in its 10th ministerial conference on its 9th ministerial conference. So, now on the 10th ministerial conference, which was held in Nairobi in 2015, which eliminated tariffs on an additional 200 IT products specially mentioned. So at over 1.3 trillion US dollar per year. And another outcome of the conference of the Bali was on abolishing agriculture export subsidies. So the focus over the time in the recent negotiation on NAMA, on agriculture products related to subsidies, which has fulfilled one of the key targets of the United Nations National Development Goals on zero hunger. Zero hunger was discussed, which is the target of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So therefore, SDG is also part of the framework of WTO negotiations. Therefore, WTO has been considered as a holistic platform to deal with not just on trade, also on many developmental challenges. And most recently on there are certain amendments to WTO intellectual property agreements, which was came into force in 2017, especially on easing poor economies access to affordable medicines. Now related to medicines has been discussed in the recent agreements. We will discuss what do we mean by agreements, what do we mean by ministerial conferences, so in detail. Now TRIPS, as I said, trade related intellectual property rights is one of the purviews of WTO, and it was not part of the discussion under GATT. So it began with trade in goods, especially from GATT it was in goods till 1994, and especially lowering customs duty rates and trade barriers on goods, but particularly the text related to rules on and non-discriminations are actually taken off, especially after 1995, but non-discrimination and important roles were largely discussed related to goods only under GATT. We have discussed already. Now from GATT, so under the aegis of WTO agreements, a number of state specific trades issues related to state trading, product standards, subsidies, action taken against dumping were also taken off. Especially standards, those are taken off as part of TRIPS. And especially most importantly, all those details are written only because this is a kind of note for everyone. IP, intellectual property agreements, amounts to rules of trade and investment in ideas, especially ideas and creativity. We will also discuss a case study how Bangladesh actually imposed a complaint under WTO, especially utilizing TRIPS rules to against India for a movie, and its song on that movie called movie named as Murder. So which was released, and we will discuss in the next class. So the rules pertaining to copyrights, patents, trademarks, geographical names used to identify products, industrial designs, integrated circuits, circuit layouts, designs on undisclosed information such as trade secrets. So trade secrets is highly discussed over different rounds, especially called intellectual property. So should be protected as trade grows, and in nutshell TRIPS agreement covers 7 categories of intellectual property related issues, and therefore this is very important part of our discussion. Now another most important action of WTO is on dispute settlement system. So and then in the previous one we discussed 7 categories of intellectual property, and many times rules of origins are emphasized, rules of origin, which is very difficult to count. We will discuss in our subsequent slides. So countries often counter various forms of disputes, and so therefore the body under WTO gives judgments, and then they are specially appointed independent experts and based on interpretations and agreements and individual countries commitment towards different agreements we will discuss also. Now, here we are discussing trade policy review mechanism TPRM. The purpose is to improve transparency and create greater understanding of the policies so that monopolies should be restricted. So, MRTP monopoly restrictive trade practices has been actually the matter of contention under TPRM. Now, all WTO member must undergo periodic scrutiny and each review containing reports by the country concerned and the WTO Secretariat. So, let us understand what is the structure of WTO. We must know it in order to have a better understanding of WTO and its functions. So, WTO till the date there are 164 member countries and which is accounting for 98% of the world trade. So, therefore, only 2% of the countries are not included. A total of 22 countries are negotiating members, not yet granted a full membership. Now, due to various norms attached with WTO preambles. So, we have already discussed headquarter in Geneva, formation was in 1st January 1995, 164 even till the date it is 164 member countries. So, decisions are made by the entire members, this is typically by consensus. So, majority vote is not is also a majority vote is also possible, but it has never been used in WTO. It has never been used just based on majority vote, rather it is based on consensus decisions or with the negotiations. So, the top level body which is called top level body of WTO is called ministerial conferences, which meets usually every 2 years, meets usually in every 2 years. So, below this the ministerial conference, the apex body of WTO, there are called General Council, normally consist of ambassadors, heads of delegation based on Geneva and sometimes officials sent from members capitals. So, like for example, Delhi is our capital and is nominating members to be represented in the General Council, otherwise our ambassadors are also part of the General Council, which meets several times in a year, whereas the ministerial conference and its meetings are held in every 2 years. So, again usually the meet take place for the General Council is in Geneva headquarter. So, General Council also meets the trade policy review body TPRB and the dispute settlement body in order to discuss the disputes raised by different member countries. At the next level after the General Council is called Goods Council or Services Council and Intellectual Property Councils. There are 3 important next channels: Goods Council, Services Councils and IPR TRIPS Council, which is report to the General Council. They report their decisions to the General Council. So, this is all about the structure. Ministerial conference once in 2 years, then at least several times in a year. So, therefore, this is called General Council. General Council consists of majorly of trade policy related review and dispute settlement body. Under this General Council again we have Goods Council, Services Council, Intellectual Property, and another one is also called T and D or T and E. We will discuss this in detail. So, this is the complete mapping of the structure of WTO which has been taken from source is WTO only, WTO website. So, this is the standard source and here we have written as ministerial conference, then General Council. Under General Council dispute settlement body is there. Then here it is Trade Council for Goods and plurilateral again related to plurilateral related to IT agreement trade to goods, then this is intellectual property, this is for services. Then again under those bodies we will have another part is called General Council meeting as Trade Policy Review Board, TPRB. This is one, this is second, this is third, this is fourth, this is fifth, most important part. And under General Council there are, let me read out, since there are so many points given, it is the font is very little and you can go through the slide and find out on your own. Let me read out some of the important aspect. This committee is consisting of trade and environment, trade and development, subcommittee on least developed countries, trade, regional trade agreements, RTAs, balance of payment restrictions, budget, finance, administration, working parties are also there. So, other you may follow it off. So, let me also point out, suppose we take off the discussion for services. Now, it is the committee on discussing trade in financial services, specific commitments, working parties on domestic regulations, general agreements on trade in services and rules related to services. Similarly, you may follow certain answers related to other heads we have already discussed. Now, as I already mentioned, 98% of the world trade explained by the member countries, and there are 164 countries. Here in highlighted in green color are the member countries, whereas highlighted in yellow color are the observer countries who are in the negotiation process, they are in the process of accession, so not yet granted. Now, those are in other color, they are no longer not at a member. Now, here you can see Ethiopia is here, Libya, some of the African countries are not yet member of the WTO. Otherwise, all other many countries are actually the member countries. Now, if you go through the WTO website, you will find the details of the non-member countries for your better understanding. Now, let us discuss something on the issues which are discussed, which are important for discussion on the WTO. So, here this is the website of WTO. Here are the trade topics. Under these are divided like this, like this. Okay. So, goods, as I mentioned, goods, services, then intellectual property, then dispute settlement. These are the four important pillars of activities or topics discussed. Then also RTA related issues, regional trading agreements, especially emphasis was given on Doha Development Agenda DDA because of many coverages given, trade monitoring and more topics are discussed. Most importantly, under the goods, anti-dumping, agriculture issues are discussed largely in different rounds. Then also IT related agreements are given, customs valuations are made, balance of payment discussions are made. So far as other goods related discussions are rules of origin, where we are emphasizing intellectual property rights issues. So, therefore, there will be disputes. So, dispute settlements are also discussed. As we have already taken off our discussion in the earlier lectures on many measures obtained by member countries for countering or to have their better trade, especially on the count of SPS and TBT, sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So, technical barriers to trade is given and these links are given in the WTO website. If you just click on any of the topic, you will find detailed discussion. Therefore, WTO website is must. Now, services, especially ITIP services I have already discussed. This is the database containing all kind of harmonized standard codes which of data of the member countries. You can collect it for further analysis. So, rest of the discussion you may follow it and are also important for understanding, and especially on dispute settlement aspect, we must actually think about issues of intellectual property, especially there is a dispute settlement body and appellate body which gives their verdict from time to time, and we will discuss a case study on this. We will also talk about preferential trading agreements, regional trading agreements as part of plurilateral agenda, as part of multinationalism or regionalism, which is actually undermining the monopolization of products. So, these are very important aspects should be taken off for further understanding. Now, in order to understand WTO again in detail, the basic structure of the WTO is on certain principles, certain details, certain market literacy issues, transparency and dispute settlement, and so goods majorly was discussed in GATT. So, GATTs were actually discussed from WTO, formation of WTO. So, as we discussed earlier, this TRIPS is also part of the WTO, and these are various agreements which establish WTO. For goods especially we have already discussed though, but rules of origin is very important, import licensing, safeguarding, then agriculture is agriculture, SPS, TBT, and for services especially air transport, financial services, shipping, telecommunication are important channels by which WTO members settle their discussions. So, let us have a comparison between WTO and GATT. The GATT was an ad hoc and provisional arrangement for negotiation, but whereas WTO is a permanent settlement. It is a permanent institution and a body that regulates the trade flows and many other issues. So, whereas GATT has no provision for creating organizations, but it has certainly and member nations have verified the WTO agreements. GATT allowed contradictions in local law and GATT agreements, whereas more authority, it has more authoritative power than GATT, and WTO does not allow any contradiction in local law because they derive the harmonization or the standardized issues or codes. So, therefore, what are the objectives of WTO? The primary objective is to implement the new trading agreements, promote multilateral trade and a free trade also, so that free trade and by abolishing trade and non-tariff barriers, then this could actually help in enhancing competitiveness among the member countries that largely benefit consumers. So, thereby it also enhance productivity of the producers and increase the level of employment in the world, and it facilitates flow of labor and utilize world resources in a most optimum manner. And WTO objective is also to have better living standard of the population of its member countries and speed of development of the member countries. And so, as therefore, to take special steps in many of its agreements to deal with the challenge of poor nations because they are cut off from the mainstream. And so, therefore, we have already discussed objectives are based on certain principles. So, largely it is said the principles are non-discriminatory principles. Then MFN nation status, if this says if you are granting special MFN duties to a nation, you have to treat this status to all the member countries. Therefore, the basic principle of WTO is MFN, so treating other people equally, and national treatment as well as foreign treatment, and freer trade. And predictability through binding and transparency is a clause promoting fair competition, encouraging development and economic reform. So, these are various ways by which the principles are actually followed. So, functions we have already discussed, but anyway it is through its agreement, through ministerial conferences and through its general council, and it also cooperate IMF and World Bank, and it is associated in establishing coordination in global trade making. And so, also the function most importantly on settling the disputes, and TPRB, as I already mentioned, trade related policy board is very important in settling economic policies and review the policies from time to time, and also it helps in managing foreign trade policies and fiscal policies of the member nations. So, this is a forum for trade liberalization. Therefore, these are the scope we have already discussed. Scope are measured in goods, services, intellectual property and investment major streams. So, argument in favor we have already discussed, I am not emphasizing, these are repetitive, and accordingly we find many ways, and especially I will mention dumping, textile, clothing, agriculture most importantly, and there are many other aspects. So, therefore, in this particular lecture we discussed many aspects, functions, objective, principles, different bodies of WTO, different targets of WTO. Then we also differentiate GATT and WTO, different rounds of GATT as well as different ministerial conference of WTO we have already discussed. Now, with this we could able to understand WTO functions carefully. So, in the next lecture we will unfold the discussion of certain cases, certain disputes in the bodies of WTO among the member countries, and we will find out India's position under WTO framework. With this, I think I should stop here. We will carry forward in the next class. Thank you.